In the West, we like to think we have freedom of the press and an even freer entertainment industry, but in 2016, accusations of government propaganda are higher than ever. I recently spoke with Tom Secker of spyculture.com about the concept of state-sponsored entertainment. He's found some very interesting things through freedom of information that suggest our entertainment isn't as free as we first thought. I believe the last time we did a show, you had just started to investigate this state-sponsored entertainment stuff. So, if we start bluntly, what is state-sponsored entertainment in the context of what you've been looking at?
Well, I mean, the term state-sponsored, obviously we're borrowing from things like state-sponsored terrorism, but it essentially means that. It means entertainment where a government agency, though not always the government agency in strict terms, but usually has in some way got involved in the production process. So either they've helped write the script, or they've provided technical advice when a scene is being shot, or they've provided equipment or locations, or all of the various things that you need that go into making up a movie. At some point along the line, a state agency can actually be involved in any of that, and sometimes actually in all of that. In some of the movies that we've looked at, these were either produced from start to finish in cooperation with an agency, or in some cases, rare cases, were essentially written by the agency themselves and then handed over to Hollywood to actually turn into a film. So
and are we talking just movies or TV shows as well?
TV shows, computer games, to some extent emerging, web-based entertainment media, but it's primarily films and TV shows. They are moving into the internet realm and the computer games realm more and more so, but they're very much focusing on Hollywood and mainstream network TV.
I wonder if we'll ever get state-sponsored podcasts, or
I'm sure we already have to some extent, but that's not something that we've been able to kind of document yet. Because I started on this, like you say, back in 2012, 2013, when I was writing my 7/7 book and looking at all of the stuff around particularly the show Spooks, which had people from both British and American intelligence, or at least ex-British and American intelligence working on it. That's really what pushed me down this road, was thinking, well, if this was in some way important to the 7/7 attacks, what's its kind of wider relevance? What's the big picture here, if you know what I'm saying?
Obviously, we all know about historical propaganda during the World Wars or whatever. But in this modern context, when did these agencies come into being? When did this kind of start? Or has it always been that way since the start of film?
More or less since the start of the industry, to be honest, in some way or another, or at least the earliest films that we know of with the Department of Defense are the 1910s. So we're going back a century for them. The FBI, who were founded in the 1920s, I think they developed their first Hollywood office in the 1930s. It didn't take them very long at all. The Department of Defense formally established all of these different liaison offices when they created the Pentagon formally in 1947, after the war. NASA and the CIA both took until the 1990s before they actually established a proper office, but both of them were involved on a sort of ad hoc, informal way throughout the whole of their existence. I mean, the CIA, as soon as they started existing in 1947, they started developing a relationship with Hollywood. Same with NASA. So, yeah, different periods in terms of when you actually have like a formal office and therefore a formal bureaucracy that you can file requests on. But yeah, they all have them now. Absolutely.
And if I play devil's advocate, what makes a state-sponsored piece of entertainment a bad thing? All organisations have PR, they have to worry about their image and how they're portrayed. Where do you draw the line between, they're just kind of, promoting their image to, let's say, full-blown kind of propaganda that you might expect in the Soviet Union or something like that?
Well, I don't think we get much of that kind of explicit iron fist propaganda that you would get from Soviet propagandists or from fascist propagandists. We've never had a huge amount of that in Western society, or in, whatever democratic liberal society, whatever tag you want to stick on it. So to draw a clear distinction isn't easy. What makes it a bad thing is that they don't offer it to anyone. They will only work with people who will make a film that is within the kind of limits that they want them to make a film within. So, for example, you have Louis Theroux, who I'm quite a big fan of, to be fair.
Me too. I hope this is not the end of...
Oh, no. He was denied cooperation
okay.
by the US Marine Corps. He wanted to make a documentary in his usual style, basically showing what they went through in their training and initiation and induction procedures, and how they went from being, fresh-faced young lad just joining the military into ultimately being a uniformed soldier. And I get the impression that the documentary they were seeking to make was maybe a bit like the first half of Full Metal Jacket, and that's obviously how the Marine Corps saw it. So they said no. They said, no, we're not giving you access, we're not letting you interview anyone, we're not giving you access to training bases or any of the other things that you would need to make that documentary. And so it never got made. So that's what makes it a bad thing, is that unless you go along with their agenda, they won't help you. They'll just say no. And in fact, even with things like the remake of Red Dawn, when they wanted to go and get military cooperation for vehicles, I think it was mostly what they were looking for, military stuff, the DoD came back and said, no, we don't like the script because you've got China invading the United States, and we want you to change that to someone else. So as a result, they didn't help them make the film. After they'd made the film, the producers then decided, for whatever reason, to change China into North Korea. So all of the flags are changed with CGI in post-production. They then go back to the military and say, oh, well, will you now help us do some promotional stuff for the film? Will you let us do this promotional premiere at Camp Pendleton? And they said no. And it was essentially because they'd not made that change in the first place. So even once they'd made it in post-production, the military was still a bit kind of once bitten, twice shy. They didn't want anything to do with them because the people hadn't gone along at the first opportunity. So that's why it's a bad thing, is because they are, in all sorts of ways, having quite a profound effect on shaping the entertainment that we're getting to see. Because it also works by implication and subconsciously. If you're writing a film and you think at some point along the line we're going to need some military help with some of this,
right,
then you kind of know deep down, well, that means we can't portray soldiers too badly, and we can't portray America too badly, and so it must have a huge influence on things.
Why do you think filmmakers go along with this? I can see why these agencies would get something out of it, but what are the filmmakers getting out of it? Is it just that they can use an official army tank in their film, or is there a different kind of relationship with certain directors and things like that? What's the dynamic like?
Again, it depends from production to production. I mean, with some producers, like, say, Jerry Bruckheimer, he clearly has a long-standing and very positive relationship with the DoD. Michael Bay would be another one who... What are they getting out of it is a good question. I mean, I guess part of it is what you're saying, that it's not just that they can get an army tank as opposed to a tank that, they've just bought from wherever or rented from wherever. It's also that they can get the most up-to-date stuff.
Right.
Anyone can go and find you some scrap heap old tank from the 70s or 80s that's not really working anymore, and, you blow it up and stick it on film and it kind of looks good. But if you want something that's looks like, oh, no one's ever seen this before, never seen a fighter jet do that before, the only place you can get that is the military, because no one else is developing, next generation fighter jets. No one else has the money. No one else has the equipment. So even in the DoD's own directives on relations with the entertainment industry, they say we're only allowed to provide stuff that they can't get elsewhere. And that's supposedly for legal reasons. They're not supposed to be competing with private agencies and whatever, private corporations that might provide technical advice to filmmakers. But the upshot of this is that exactly that. They can't go elsewhere and get this. They might be able to go to another national government and borrow a submarine or something, but they're, deep down, you'd rather do it here in America with people who speak English and, and all of that. So once again, the influence is quite considerable.
Do you think it's also a bit of an ego thing? Like, oh, I got to go schmooze with the CIA or the DOD today, and they made me feel all special. And do you think there's an element of that in certain sort of circles in Hollywood?
Probably more with the CIA, because if you get into bed with the CIA, then you actually get to go to Langley and chat up some CIA agents. And I mean, there is that hilarious bit in one of the Argo making of features on the DVD where Ben Affleck's talking about how he went to the CIA, he went to Langley, and he just walked the halls. He just got a feel for the place. And I'm thinking, what, they just let him loose?
Right.
Running around Langley? Maybe not, Ben, but yeah, there are certainly people like Affleck and his buddies Clooney and Heslov, I think, another two, who are very much, they want to be part of that world. They don't, want to be out there spying in the field, but they want to be able to get behind the door. It makes them feel more important. It makes them feel like they're something more than just a movie star. Because ultimately being a movie star is a pretty vacuous, superficial job. So you can understand why they would feel like that. So yeah, I think that's another thing that they're getting out of it. Yeah.
Who was the guy? It slipped my mind, but he somehow went after that Mexican drug cartel guy. Did an interview with him or something.
Oh, Sean Penn.
Right. Is he in any of these state-sponsored kind of projects?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Well, this was one of the things that struck me when that story broke, that Sean Penn had somehow interviewed El Chapo Guzman, the so-called Bin Laden of the Mexican drug cartel.
It sounds like a film in itself, like a bad film, like some journalist goes off or some actor even, yeah.
Well, apparently they were planning on making a biopic about him. That was the idea. So this is why El Chapo, despite escaping from prison in his, very plush tunnel that someone built for him in order to escape from that prison. And he's been in hiding since then, but for some reason he spoke to Sean Penn, and it does seem to have been a bit of an ego trip for him, that he thought, oh, Hollywood bigwig wants to come and talk to me. Yeah, I'll let him in. And this is how he was recaptured. But yeah, Sean Penn was in The Interpreter, which is a 2007 film starring Nicole Kidman. It's all based at the United Nations. And that is a Chase Brandon CIA Entertainment Liaison Office assisted production, a CIA-assisted production. He also starred in Fair Game, which is the adaptation of Valerie Plame's book. If you remember Valerie Plame and the Yellow Cake Uranium and all of that story. Plamegate, it was called. Anyway, and she's ex-CIA. And he stars in the adaptation of her book. And quite a few people, actually, from that world ended up in the film Fair Game. And like the directors and producers are also people who previously worked with the CIA as well. So, yeah, Sean Penn does seem to have brushed up against that world a bit, certainly.
It seems like he's kind of a wannabe spy. He wants to go out and do all this dangerous stuff. It's like, well, hang on a minute, mate. Like, calm down.
No, I did get that impression when I first saw that story. I thought, that's a pretty risky thing to do. I don't know if I'd go and interview some psycho leader of a Mexican drug cartel. There's a chance you are just going to end up being butchered and, tossed in a ravine or something.
Yeah, usually they just kind of, I don't know, stand up at the UN and talk about climate change or something and get their brownie points that way. But
yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's the sort of thing Angelina Jolie does quite a lot of. And she's another one very much in this world. So, yeah, I would say there is a kind of clique within Hollywood who are friendly with the CIA and who want to get into a kind of higher status for themselves and see the CIA as a means of doing that.
So, if we go back to the filmmaker dynamic, to your knowledge, has any filmmaker, I don't know, gone through the process to a point and ever said, sod off, I don't want to work with you guys, I don't like your limitations, we're going to do it this way and we don't care? Is that ever kind of come out?
It does happen, yeah. Um, you have actually, it's happened more than once with Tony Scott. Remember the British film director Ridley Scott's brother, Tony Scott, who threw himself off a bridge in San Francisco, I think.
I don't, but that sounds quite interesting.
This guy, well, you know who Ridley Scott is, who made
Yeah,
Alien
yeah.
and whatever. His brother Tony Scott made Top Gun and
Right.
what's that awful Tom Cruise one where he's like a NASCAR driver or something?
Oh
Um,
God, I don't know.
Days of Thunder. But he also made Enemy of the State with the CIA's
All right.
assistance. Whole bunch of other movies. Tony Scott also made Crimson Tide, the nuclear submarine movie, where there is a mutiny on a U.S. nuclear submarine, and they're arguing between Gene Hackman and Denzel Washington. You know, do they launch the missile? Obviously, they wanted to borrow a submarine from the Navy to film the whole thing on. So they went to the Pentagon, and the Pentagon said, no, we don't like this idea of a mutiny on board a nuclear submarine, funnily enough. So is there any chance you can change that storyline? And Tony Scott was essentially like, well, no, that's what the whole story of the film's about. And so they didn't cooperate. So Tony Scott went off and borrowed a submarine off the French. And that's how that film got made. A few years later, he then makes, like I say, Enemy of the State with the CIA. But a couple of years after making that, he was making a film called Spy Game with Robert Redford and Brad Pitt. And both the DoD and the CIA refused to be involved with that film. The CIA went a little, somewhat down the way with them, and there was a visit to Langley, and Brad Pitt and Robert Redford went off to the CIA to chat to some people. But when they read the final draft of the script, they decided, no, this is portraying the CIA perhaps a little too accurately. And so they withdrew cooperation, and so it stopped. And every time cooperation is denied to a production like that, they will ask them, they will say, we'd like for you to make these changes. They do try and work. You know, the DoD and the CIA always want to work with the entertainment industry, but there are some times when the entertainment industry, it's actually them who has to say, no, we're not prepared to make those changes. It's not happening.
If we flip it around, has the state ever effectively managed to shut down a movie because the filmmakers didn't, want any involvement, and somehow, the whole movie kind of fell through? Has that ever happened?
A couple of occasions, yeah, there have been films that could only have been made if you had the cooperation of the military. There was one, again, I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head because it wasn't ever actually produced. It was due to star Sigourney Weaver, and she was going to be a Navy psychiatrist, and it essentially portrayed the Navy and the conditions of, I suppose, the psychological conditions of being in the Navy in a way that they didn't like. So they said, no, we're not going to cooperate, and the film never really got even fully scripted. It never really got out of development. Like I say, there was that Louis Theroux documentary that never got produced, precisely because they couldn't make it without the military's cooperation. There's a bunch of other stuff that, if you go through the Marine Corps office reports, their entertainment liaison office reports, they include a section on what they're denying, what they're rejecting each, week by week or month by month. And there's a whole bunch of stuff, and most of this will have never actually been turned into productions, because if you need a military base and if you need to have shots of a helicopter landing and troops jumping off it, it's pretty difficult to do that without, you could fake it all with CGI, but it's an awful lot of hassle to go to for like a 3-second shot or something. So, yeah, there's plenty of stuff that has never been made precisely because the military rejected it, or was made in a very different way and had to be made a different kind of production in order to actually make it happen without the military's help. Yeah.
And you mentioned some documentation there. Where can people listening to this go to get, the results of your Freedom of Information request, the files, PDFs or whatever? Where can they go to get all that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, on my site, spyculture.com, if you click on the Documents tab in the navigation bar at the top, that will give you all the various different posts I've made on all the different documents that I've dug up from different places. If you just Google for the biggest ever FOIA release from the Pentagon's Entertainment Liaison Office. That's an article that I've written. If you just look for Entertainment Liaison Office reports, I imagine then they should come up. In fact, they should be one of the number one things on Google. But yeah, all of the PDFs, everything that I've got, is all up on the site spyculture.com.
And a lot of your work has uncovered, obviously, Hollywood stuff, the US, where the film industry thrives. But what about Britain? How far does this sort of go in Britain? Have you managed to get documents and things about, I don't know, MI5 or the MOD or whatever?
Well, not the intelligence services, because they're exempt from the Freedom of Information Act.
Oh, convenient.
Yeah, you can't. I mean, the only stuff you can get on them is stuff that comes out through the National Archives. And there are a few bits and pieces. There was, for example, there was a Panorama documentary back in 1980, 81, something like that. We now have substantial documents showing that the security services essentially lent on the BBC, demanded an advanced screening of it, and then told them what to edit out of the documentary to make it acceptable to them. And I think that one actually never ended up being broadcast as a result. Or if it was broadcast in the heavily modified form. So there are things like that. The Ministry of Defence actually employs an outside firm called Landmark, who not only maintain all of the Ministry of Defence properties, like the house at the end of Skyfall, where they have the big ending sequence and the silly Home Alone style fighting. That was all like mocked up and built on a piece of MOD property. And in order to do that, you have to go to this company called Landmark, who are subcontracted by the MOD, and they maintain all of these properties, and they're the ones who actually go through they're the ones who monitor the scripts and say yes or no, you can come and film here, we'll help you do this or that, whatever it is you're looking for. And I do have a somewhat sketchy database of various things that Landmark have worked on since 1991. And that includes plenty of big Hollywood films. I mean, we're talking like The Avengers Age of Ultron, which was possibly the biggest film last year. That's as big as Hollywood gets. And so, yes, the Ministry of Defence is involved in that. I am still engaged in an ongoing freedom of information battle with the Foreign Office, trying to get information out of them, which is getting quite frustrating because it has been going on for about 6 months. But there again, they were involved in Skyfall. I think they were involved in Skyfall. They were involved in Spectre, the latest James Bond movie. They've been involved in Downton Abbey, believe it or not.
I can't stand that damn program.
Well, no, not can I. But I'm just saying it is one of the big TV shows, and yet they're being assisted by Ministry of Defence, Foreign Office. These are big government agencies. These are the absolute core of the British state, are they not?
So tell us about this bus explosion thing, because I watched that video on spyculture.com and I was quite surprised that this was a thing, considering, we've got this heightened kind of fear of ISIS attacks and things. What was all this about with this bus?
Well, like you say, a bus was blown up on Lambeth Bridge, which is literally just next to the MI5 headquarters building. That's at one end of the bridge. So, and this was done for the purposes of a film called The Foreigner, which is being made with Pierce Brosnan and Jackie Chan.
Jackie Chan?
Yeah, it might actually turn out to be quite a good film in the end.
So by foreigner, they don't mean a random Muslim guy. They mean Jackie Chan.
I'm not entirely sure what the plot of the film is, to be perfectly honest. But yeah, it's an odd title, The Foreigner. who, like you say, who is the foreigner? Which foreign to whom? Anyway, so they blow up this film as part of the action. This bus as part of the film's action sequences or whatever, and it is just like the bus bombing on 7/7. It's right at the back of the top deck. If you look at the aftermath pictures, what the bus looks like, the one on the bridge, and what the one in Tavistock Square looked like, it's very similar, eerily so. And so I thought, surely when they were making the decision to allow this to happen, they must have considered that this was very, very reminiscent of the last major terrorist attack in this country. And they must have thought, given we've been going on endlessly about terrorism, certainly since what happened in Paris before Christmas, this must have been a consideration. And I wondered, what process did they go through? What kind of discussion did they have about this? Why did they decide to let this happen? Because they did send out a few flyers and a few things, stick up a few posters and a couple of things on Twitter.
I don't remember it being in the news, but...
Well, I mean, it wouldn't have been in the news where we were, but I mean locally. But it wasn't very effective, because quite a lot of people were kind of like, hang on, holy hell, a bus has just blown up on Lambeth Bridge. So I've been trying to get stuff through the Freedom of Information Act on that, essentially, to answer that question.
Did people know exactly that it was happening? Was anyone taken aback by it?
Well, it seems so, yeah. When it actually happened, there was a bit of an outcry mostly on social media, so you kind of have to take that with a pinch of salt, I guess. But yes, they sent out some kinds of flyers and warnings, but it seems a lot of people didn't know it was going to happen. And the other question is, they warned MI5, they warned MI6, they warned Ministry of Defence. So all of them, those people knew this isn't a real terrorist attack, so there's nothing to worry about. We don't have to, rush out there and do whatever. But they didn't adequately warn the public? Isn't that in itself a kind of terrorism? Or at least something that's a bit morally dubious and perhaps even designed that way as a kind of promotion for the film, if you're with me?
It reminds me of actually something I just... in my local town, there was a police chief, well, just some head of police or something for the local police force. He retired, and the local pub decided they were going to kind of give him a send-off, and they did this by putting police tape around the pub, putting fake blood on the floor, drawing like a chalk line as if something had gone down, right? And there was supposedly all these phone calls like, what's going on, what happened at this pub, people are scared, it gets blown up into a thing. So I was just kind of surprised that I didn't hear about this bus, because I mean that's that kind of thing on a giant scale.
It is, yeah. And these things do happen, I wouldn't say often, but they happen often enough that you would have thought people would know beforehand. If we do something like this, there are going to be some people who think it's real and don't realise, and it's going to cause a panic. And so, yeah, like I say, it's a bit morally dubious. It's certainly just, if nothing else, it's just a bit bloody irresponsible, really. I think, and given that this had to happen with a bunch of government agencies giving the okay, that was why I was concerned about it. It's not like this is just some pranksters doing this at some college or whatever. This is a Hollywood production company doing it in the middle of London with the permission of, presumably, MI5, Home Office.
Yeah, it makes you wonder, what's their priority? Keeping this film company happy, or warning the public of things that might...
Exactly, yeah. Yeah, and I think that you're right. Their priority is the film company. They will essentially let them do whatever they want. And certainly with the Met Police, they're like, every single Freedom of Information request I've ever put into the Met Police has in some way been refused. And the one they did on this was spectacularly dumb, because the email that they sent back saying we can't give you any documents about this bus explosion, about this film The Foreigner, they just sent me the one that they'd sent me about the film Kingsman, and in a couple of places had even forgotten to delete the part where it says Kingsman and replace it with text saying The Foreigner. So it was really obvious they just copy-pasted the email. I mean, their FOIA office is a disgrace. So this is what you have. You have the Met Police saying, yeah, come and blow up a bus in the middle of London. We don't care. Warn the public a little bit, but if that's ineffective, we're not going to cause any hassle for you. And if anyone asks any questions, we'll just cover the whole thing up. And I think that's not right. You know what I mean? It's just something wrong about that. So I think it's something worth trying to highlight and worth trying to find out more about.
They probably know you by now, though. They're probably sitting there thinking, oh, we've got another email from this guy. Get the template.
Oh, they probably do, yeah. I get the impression that's very much how the Foreign Office now sees me, because I did actually stumble across someone else's FOIA request asking how many people work in the offices, the FOIA offices of these various different government departments. And for the Foreign Office, which is, think about it, it's a global organisation, really. I think they had 9 people. So I'm sure those 9 people now know my name and know who I am and know that I'm not very happy with them.
Yeah, I can't imagine what a boring job they have. I mean, you can probably appreciate why they're so, not very kind of enthusiastic about giving all this information, because the amount of crap they must have to just sift through. And
Well, this is another one of those things that I was looking at only a few weeks ago, was the logs of all the FOIA requests that have been put into the CIA in recent years, because I was looking for clues for various stuff. And like, people were asking for proof that Ho Chi Minh was a member of international Freemasonry. I mean, come on, you're not, even if that was true, you're not going to get it through a FOIA request to the CIA, are you? I do feel a little bit sorry for the poor sod who's actually got to read that and, like, write a letter saying, no, we don't have any information on Ho Chi Minh being a member of international Freemasonry. Yeah, you do feel some sympathy for these poor souls.
there's something I didn't realise really about freedom of information. You're a UK citizen, and you can file a freedom of information request to a US department.
Yep.
For some reason, I didn't really consider that as a thing. I thought it would kind of be, you can only do it with your government, but...
No, when I was first getting into this, years and years ago, when I was mostly for terrorism-related stuff, FBI files on terrorism attacks, that kind of thing, I started wondering, can I ask for FBI files? What happens if I do? Will they refuse it? And no, I looked it up. There is no restriction, not on the American Freedom of Information Act, and not on quite a lot of others. Like the Swedish have had a access to information law for like 400 years or something, and I've filed requests with them, and there was no refusal on the grounds that I'm a British citizen. They were perfectly happy to accept them. Other people can file requests with British agencies, people from other countries. It does depend. There are some countries, like I think India, I can't file a request with India, but yeah, it depends from country to country. Certainly with the US and the UK, anyone anywhere in the world can send an email and request information.
What are some of the lessons you've learned going through this process? Do you think the FOIA system is fit for purpose? Are there tricks you have to learn to get things to go through, and the kind of scope that you have to ask and stuff like that?
Yes. Firstly, no, the FOIA system is not remotely fit for purpose. It's sometimes, I mean, I got one back. I told you about this. I got a FOIA request back from the US State Department that is 4 years old. And this was about Mohammed Junaid Babar, this 7/7 related super spy.
Right, yeah.
And it was essentially one embassy cable, one US State Department embassy cable that mentions Junaid Babar, that it'd taken them 4 years to locate and release this, and it basically told us nothing. So why they didn't release that back in 2012, I do not know. But yeah, a lot of these offices are massively understaffed. A lot of them have a huge backlog of stuff to try and get through. I do have, like I say, some sympathy for them, but at the same time, I've also experienced, particularly with the FBI, massive incompetence and just general, I wouldn't necessarily say lies, so much as just an attitude of not taking it seriously. But yeah, the FBI and the Metropolitan Police especially their offices are awful. To their credit, the Pentagon are better. I have sometimes actually received requests within the 20-day time limit from the Pentagon. Not very often, but occasionally. Whereas I've never experienced that with, the CIA or the Foreign Office or anyone else. As to tricks you have to play, it's good to know what you're looking for beforehand. Because, I mean, my biggest FOIA success to date, I suppose, would be these reports from the Pentagon's entertainment liaison offices. Because these go back several years. For the Marine Corps, I got 7 years of reports out of them. And the reason I was able to get that is because I knew that these documents existed. Because I'd read copies of ones from back in 2004, 2005. So I just put in requests linking to these documents that already existed, saying I want the equivalent documents for the last 10 years. And they can't then turn around and say, oh no, we have no such records. They can't do the pretend it doesn't exist answer. They have to admit, yeah, you've got us fair and square on that one. There is this report series that we do, so we can't deny that they exist, and so we have to release them. Things like that help. Likewise, if you come across a document, say an FBI file is mentioned in a newspaper report, copy the newspaper report, give them a link or a PDF version of the newspaper report saying you want the file that was released to this journalist for this newspaper report. Because then they can't pretend it doesn't exist. They can't, do that. What, who, me? I don't know.
Are they willing to confirm, say you're reading some, I don't know, some random blog and it says the FBI said this about aliens in this document once. Can you go and say, well, I saw this, is this an actual FBI document? Do they have a way of confirming things that is already out there but you don't know whether it's actually real or not?
What you could do is take the date. If the blog is mentioning a date for the document, especially, that helps. Because then you can say, I want, copies of any documents on this subject between this date and this date. And if they say, we didn't come up with anything, we don't have any of that, that usually means either the document doesn't exist, or that they've lost it, or that it never existed in the first place, or that it was a fake, or whatever. Sometimes they will get back and they will send it to you. If they send you something that they believe to be fake, they will always attach a letter saying, we believe this to be a false document, but it was part of our records anyway. So, yeah, you can get that sort of response out of them. I got this with the infamous Marilyn Monroe CIA memo. I asked the CIA, is this I asked them for a copy of the document, and they sent me back a internal assessment that they'd written some years ago saying that they think the document is fake. So, yeah, you can get things like that.
With this whole Snowden thing, you get a plethora of just what are obviously bullshit articles saying Snowden said this, it was in this thing that was leaked, and it's like, well, did he? Like, even if someone says they've got documents, it's still kind of difficult to know whether they actually do or not.
Snowden is a really good example of that. We've had a lot of Snowden says that Israel created ISIS. Did he? No. Did he release any documents saying that? No. It didn't fucking happen. but people believe it in enormous numbers. Partly just because it's got that magical word Snowden. Rule of thumb, as always, unless someone's actually providing you with a document they're talking about, don't necessarily believe that they've got it.
Does Russia have a freedom of information process? Because everyone's always on about Putin has documents about 9/11. He's going to release them any day now, but they never come.
People have been saying that since about January 2002, so let's not hold our breath. No, as far as I know, Russia does not have a freedom of information.
Not surprising, but... Yeah.
Well, would you expect them to? No. To be honest, it's amazing we even have one in this country, and we've only had it 10 years.
What is the status of it? Are there people, say, campaigning for a different kind of freedom of information process? What do the agencies themselves, have they ever outwardly said, we're struggling with this, we don't like the way it's done, or we never even wanted this in the first place, or is there any alternatives being thrown out there or anything like that you know of?
Only that the present government is trying to reform it to make it harder for information to be released and to make people have to pay for it more often.
So we're going backwards, not forwards.
Yeah, and there are people campaigning against that, but there aren't people as far as I know, and if I'm wrong, then I'm sorry, but as far as I know, there's no one proactively campaigning for better enforcement of freedom of information laws. You do have the Information Commissioner, who I have complained to about a number of things, and they do sometimes turn around to the government department and say, you got this wrong, you need to release this information now. Just like in the US, you can file a lawsuit against the government, like, Jason Leopold has over these Hillary Clinton emails, and sometimes the courts will side in your favor and say, yeah, they've got to turn over the information. So there is... I suppose there are successes. There are people fighting for this in various disparate ways. But on the whole, particularly in the UK, it's not something that the government departments take all that seriously. I haven't come across any whistleblowers coming out and saying, these offices are a joke, we just routinely cover up stuff. But it's kind of obvious to me that they do just routinely send out a, no, we don't have any records on that kind of a response, when in fact they do. It's not a great state of affairs, and there is that infamous interview with Tony Blair where he says the Freedom of Information Act was the worst thing he ever did. And this is a man who invaded Iraq.
Right. It makes you wonder, though, in the age of information, at what point do we get where they don't just dump everything on some server somewhere and say, if you want information, come and find it yourself, it's all here. Like,
well, in theory, that's what the National Archives is supposed to be, though, yeah, it's not. I know. It's certainly with some of the stuff that I've been asking for, it's just like basic contractual information between a government department and some filmmakers. It's not the fucking crown jewels. I'm not asking for the nuclear codes. I'm not asking for who killed Kennedy. Though you do get that as well. That was something in the CIA's FOIA logs. You got quite a lot of people just writing in saying, any information on the CIA involvement in killing Kennedy. Yeah. But you know, I'm just trying to get routine kind of government bureaucracy, and yet even that is often difficult. So it is, like you say, dumping it all just on a server somewhere. Most of these are emails and electronic documents anyway. But instead what they do is they print them out and then re-scan them and then send you a PDF of the scanned version. So it's not even like digitally searchable half the time. It's absurd the lengths that they go to avoid just providing information when, like you say, we live in an era when it'd be so easy. They could just stick it all up there on a database and people could go fishing.
Where does the level stop? What can we ask for? I mean, do they have to specifically classify something as secret to keep people from accessing it? Is there different kind of levels of what they're allowed to release and stuff?
Just because something is classified doesn't mean it can't be released. They can't kind of retroactively classify something to prevent it being released. They're not really allowed to do that. Well, not legally anyway. You can ask for pretty much anything. They're not obliged to give it. They can always hide behind the national security, can't release it because it would damage whatever. So most of what I think it's wise to ask for, most of what I think it's productive to ask for, is either things that you already know exist, that you can like prove this was previously released to the author of this book or the writer of this journal or whatever, or you ask for stuff that they simply must have. Like if you have the name of the entertainment liaison officer for the Department of Defense, Phil Strubb, you could simply ask for all memos going in and out of Phil Strubb's office in the last 6 months, or all emails on Phil Strubb's email account in the last 6 months. And they probably won't release most of it. They might not release anything, but they can't deny that these people exist and therefore that these documents exist. So you've got over the first hurdle. I think things like that are what it's wisest to ask for.
Well, I think that pretty much wraps things up today, Tom. But yeah, thanks for coming back on the reboot of the WideShut Webcast.
Thanks, Keelan. It's been a lot of fun talking to you.
And just quickly, where can people go to find all of your different goings on?
Well, I mean, my site, spyculture.com, it has all the documents that we've been talking about. It has all the articles and things that I write about all of this. And it has my podcast, Clandestine. So, spyculture.com.